Hello all, today we'll be discussing the novel A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. The Portrait of the Artist is largely autobiographical. Stephen's life corresponds in most details to Joyce James. Like Stephen, he was born in Dublin to a merry, profligate father and devout Catholic mother, the eldest of 10 surviving children. Like his fictional counterpart, he attended Clongowes College, Belvedere College and University College, Dublin. During college, Joyce began to publish literary reviews, poems and plays. After graduating in 1902, he briefly studied medicine in Paris. He returned to Dublin some months later to attend his mother's funeral. At this time, he tried unsuccessfully to publish shorter, earlier versions of Portrait under the names of Portrait of the Artist and Stephen Hero. In 1904, he met Nora Barnacle, who he married and who served as an inspiration and a model for many aspects of James Joyce's fiction. The couple spent many years wandering around Europe in near poverty, settling eventually in Zurich and Paris. Portrait takes place during one of the most turbulent and eventful periods of Irish history. A significant issue during this period was Irish nationalism and separatism. Since the Norman invasion in the 12th century, large parts of Ireland had been held under British rule, and in 1801, Ireland became part of the United Kingdom. Throughout the 19th century, and especially after the great potato famines of the 1840s, many Irish people felt growing dissatisfaction with British rule and dreamed of becoming a sovereign nation. Irish separatists splintered into two major groups. One, Fenians, who favored the use of brute force, and two, constitutional reformists, who chose to follow a more moderate path within the confines of international law. Michael Davitt and Charles Parnell were famous separatist leaders of the 1870s and 80s. Under Parnell's leadership and with the support of the British Prime Minister, the Irish people hoped to finally establish Home Rule. But when it came out in 1891 that Parnell had been engaging in an extramarital affair with Kitty O'Shea, the wife of a member of the Irish Parliament, the Catholic Church denounced Parnell and he fell from power. He died only a year later, and the Irish separatist movement lost direction until erupting in the 1919 War of Independence. Joyce's novel arrived at the pinnacle of the profoundly significant literary movement known as modernism. Portrait pioneered many modernist literary techniques, including stream of consciousness, non-linear narrative structure, and widely imaginative wordplay. He brought these techniques to an even greater degree of polish in the longer, more enigmatic novel Ulysses, which brought him universal renown as well as scathing criticism. Portrait is also famous for its use of epiphany, an ecstatic moment of understanding. Joyce's modernist group included such writers as Virginia Woolf, Franz Kafka, André Bille, Marcel Proust and his student Italo Cevo. He also had strong ties with such Irish writers as W.B. Yeats. Portrait of the Artist as a young man takes place in Ireland at the turn of the century. Young Stephen Dedalus comes from an Irish Catholic family. He is the oldest of 10 children and his father is financially bankrupt. Throughout the novel, the Dedalus family makes a series of moves into increasingly damaged homes as their fortunes decline. His mother is a devout Catholic. When Stephen is young and he and the other Dedalus children are tutored by the governess Dante, a fanatically Catholic woman. Their uncle Charles also lives with the family. The book opens with a stream of consciousness technique when the narrative is filtered through a child's perspective. There is sensual imagery and words resembling a baby talk. We leap forward in time to see young Stephen beginning boarding school at Clongovis. He is very young, terribly homesick, unathletic, and socially awkward. He is an easy target for bullies, and one day he is pushed into a sump. He becomes ill from the filthy water, but he remembers what his father told him and doesn't complain. That Christmas, he eats with the adult on the table for the first time. A terrible argument erupts over politics with John Cassie and Stephen's father on one side and Dante on the other. Later that year, Stephen is unjustly punished by a prefect. He complains to the rector, winning the praises of his peers. Stephen is forced to withdraw from Clongovis because of his family's poverty. The family moves to Black Rock, where Stephen takes long walks with Uncle Charles and goes on imaginary adventures with boys from around the neighborhood. When Stephen is a bit older, the family moves to Dublin, once again because of financial difficulties. He meets a girl named Emma Clare, who is to be the object of his adoration right up until the end of the book. His father, with a bit of luck, manages to get Stephen back into a private school. He is to go to Belvedere College, another institution run by the Jesuits. Stephen comes into his own at Belvedere, a reluctant leader and a success at acting and essay writing. Despite his position of leadership, he often feels quite isolated. He continues to be a sensitive and imaginative young man acting in school plays and winning essay contests. He is also increasingly obsessed with sex. His fantasies grow more and more sensational. Finally, one night, he goes with a prostitute. It is his first sexual experience. Going with prostitutes becomes a habit. But after this, Stephen enters a period of spiritual confession. He considers his behavior sinful, but he feels oddly indifferent towards it. He cannot seem to stop going to prostitutes, nor does he want to stop. But during the annual spiritual retreat at Belvedere, he hears 3 fire sermons on the torments of hell from a priest. Stephen is terrified and he repents of his old behavior. After this, he becomes almost fanatically religious. After a time, this feeling passes. He becomes increasingly frustrated by the Catholic doctrine. When a rector suggests that he consider becoming a priest, Stephen realizes that it is not the life for him. One day, while walking on the beach, he sees a beautiful girl wading in the water, topless. Her beauty hits him with the force of a spiritual revelation, an epiphany, and he no longer feels ashamed of admiring the body. He decides that he will live life to the fullest and decides to enter the world of arts. The next time we see Stephen, he is a student at the university. University has provided valuable structure and new ideas to Stephen. In particular, he has had time to think about the works of Aquinas and Aristotle on the subject of beauty. Stephen has developed his own theory of aesthetics. He is increasingly preoccupied with beauty and art. Although he has no shortage of friends, he feels isolated. He has come to regard Ireland as a trap, and he realizes that he must escape the constraints of nation, family, and religion. He can only do that by going abroad. Stephen imagines his escape as something parallel to the flight of the mythical Dedalus. He escaped from his prison with wings crafted by his own genius. The book ends with Stephen leaving Ireland to pursue the life of a writer. When we look at the themes, the first theme is entrapment and constraint. Stephen eventually comes to see Ireland as a kind of a trap, a restraint, a constraint that will make it impossible for him to live and create. Three major bones threaten Stephen, that is family, nation, and the church. He leaves Ireland hoping to forge the new conscience of his race. Next theme is Catholicism. The church is perhaps the greatest constraint on Stephen and merits its own entry. The teachings of the church run contrary to Stephen's independent spirit and intellect. His sensitivity to beauty and the human body are not at all suitable to the rigid Catholicism in which he was raised. Despite his fears, he eventually chooses to live independently and without constraint, even if that decision sends him to hell. Next theme is escape. Escape is the natural complement to the theme of entrapment and constraint. James Joyce depicts escape metaphorically by the book's most important symbol and allusion, the mythical character Dedalus. Dedalus is not at all an Irish name. Joyce took the name from the mythical inventor who escaped from his island prison by constructing wings and flying to his freedom. Stephen too will eventually escape from the island prison of Ireland. Next theme is independence. Closely related to the above theme, Stephen's move towards independence is one of the central movements of the novel. When we first encounter Stephen as a young boy, his athletic ineptitude and sensitive nature make him an easy target for bullies. He is a rather shy and awkward boy. The contrast with the university student, Stephen, could not be greater. The older Stephen is fiercely independent, willing to risk eternal damnation to pursue his destiny. He is not cowed down by anyone, and he will pursue life as an artist no matter what the cost. Next theme is beauty, sensitivity, and imagination. What begins as sensitivity and imagination in the child Stephen eventually evolves into a near obsessive contemplation of beauty and the mechanics of art. Even as a child, young Stephen is an extraordinarily imaginative and sensitive boy. Eventually, these strong but unarticulated feelings take shape as a passion for the arts. In chapter 5 of the novel, Stephen has developed a theory of aesthetics that is quite sophisticated for a university student. He thinks carefully and thoroughly about beauty and the power of art, and knows that he can do nothing else but pursue the life of a poet and writer. Thank you for watching.